A lot of people don't start their working on their idea or don't launch the business because they don't have the perfect equipment, or they don't have the perfect website, or they are waiting for something. That I think that's an excuse. And the reality is that you're afraid of the rejection or failure. Just go. Just go, do it, take action, and see what happens. You know, you can fix things on the way.
Are you a corporate escapee and wasting valuable time attempting to figure challenges out on your own? Well, this podcast is for you. We bring you firsthand experiences of guests going through many of the struggles you face each and every day.
We get real with no corporate BS. And now, over to your host, Paul Higgins.
Hello and welcome to Corporate Escapees. Our guest today is someone who left Colombia as an architect to study in Australia. He fell out of love with architecture, but then went into design and comms for universities to attract students from all over the world. He gives 6 killer tips on things you should do when you first leave business based on his practical experience. So what I'll do now is hand you over to Ricardo Gutierrez from Bedssi. Welcome, Ricardo Gutierrez, to the Corporate Escapees podcast, brought to you by Build, Live, Give. We're going to get to know lots about you, Ricardo, but first, welcome.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, look, it's great to have you.
Really, really excited to be here talking to you, and hopefully I'm going to be able to provide valuable advice and tips.
Excellent. Well, we're looking forward to a lot of that, but why don't we just start with something that your family or friends would know about you that we wouldn't?
Well, actually, there's 2 things. I've been involved in education for close to 20 years and accommodation related to education, but I'm an architect. So I completely changed my career when I arrived in Australia. And the other thing is that people tend to see me as a positive person, and I try to make a conscious effort on that. I try to look at the solutions in things and not the problem. So I think that'll be a couple of things.
Excellent. And so was it difficult to do the architect role when you came here, or was there another reason why you decided to do something different?
Well, that's kind of part of my story. Like, I finished architecture back home, which is Colombia in Latin America. I came to Australia in '99 to do my master's degree in architecture. And I started working as an architect, and I really, I didn't really like it. Like, my expectations were somewhere else. So I started to work in education. I worked in the university where I studied. And the decision was very hard, in fact. Lots of people were putting pressure on me. My friends, which were architects, were saying, "Why are you doing this?" I felt that I had invested a lot of time and effort and money in architecture. So it's a very tough decision. But look, I think now it's one of the best decisions I've made. My passion to architecture is still there. But education and accommodation and all the things that I've done, I'm so privileged to be involved in this.
Excellent. I know that you worked at University of Sydney and ACU. Why don't you sort of take us through what you did there and then how you decided to transition into your own business?
So basically, I started because of architecture and the design background I started doing all the collateral for the Faculty of Architecture where I studied. And then my boss was really nice in giving me the opportunity to go to Latin America and bring more Colombians. And it started working. And then I went to the whole Latin America, and we became the faculty with more Latin American students. So the international office noticed that. They called us and they said, "Look, we pay for the trip, but promote the whole university, all the faculties." And then I started doing student recruitment and moved into communication. So I started to do all the collateral and products that the international students received worldwide for the whole university. And that became my emphasis in the university world. It was communications and marketing and student recruitment. I was privileged enough to travel everywhere. I represented the Australian education system, I suppose, in Middle East, Southeast Asia, Latin America. And it was then talking to thousands and thousands of students and going to conferences, where I started noticing that there was a pain in the system. Like students were consistently having problems and issues when finding accommodation in Australia. And that's how I started to think about the business.
Brilliant. And I know that you've traveled to over 60 countries. If you go to one country tomorrow for a quick visit, which one would it be?
That's very hard, because every country has different things to offer. But I look within Latin America, apart from my own country, obviously, I really like Mexico. Mexico has a lot to offer. The food is delicious. Japan as well, it's extremely nice. Europe, you cannot beat, like everything has pros, and you learn so much from each country and each culture and the history they have, and you completely understand why people behave that way. And you can only do that once you visit the country. So I just love it.
Yeah, look, same. And I got to admit, that's the one thing I'm looking forward to with having an operation soon, that I'll be able to go back and travel again, because I've sorely missed that. I love going to different cultures, experiencing people. I just wish I could speak more than one language like you do. So maybe that'll. I'm a bit lazy. I'm waiting for everyone to come to English, and it seems to be that way. But if we go back to this sort of transition, so you had a brilliant career helping people with the communication, getting more students, but you saw this gap in accommodation, so you stepped out. If you look back now, I know you've sort of been more than 3 years now. Was it harder or easier than you expected to run your own business?
Look, it's much harder. It's I think you don't really realize how hard it is until you start doing it. There's 5 specific points that I think at least impacted on me, because I love my jobs. I love the people that I work with. I love the institutions. Like, it wasn't that I wasn't happy. I just left my jobs because I thought that there's a big opportunity that if I didn't try it, I wouldn't forgive myself later on. It's that kind of thing, that what if I had done this, what would have happened? So I had to try it. And I am quite social, and I like talking to people, and that's the first thing. When you start your business, you are lonely and isolated. So try to fix that. If you have the money, try to join those shared offices and things like that, because that would fix the problem. I didn't have that luxury. I was bootstrapped since the start, so I had to get used to the isolation. The second thing is the no salary. You have to be conscious that that's going to happen. Lots of people don't really leave their jobs because of that fear of not having a salary. And in fact, many entrepreneurs, if you talk to them, they say that the salary is the worst drug there is, and people cannot leave their monthly salary. So that's actually a big fear, and I felt it. And the first few months, I just couldn't sleep. And then it's just a lot about finding a balance and being comfortable with that unknown of not having the financial salary. And then look, with the salary, I think it's, at least for me, from my perspective, I have to thank my wife for the support she gave me. She, apart from giving the financial support behind, and she also pushed me to move forward, and she's actually my rock. Like, I owe a lot to her. The third thing is getting used to rejection. You think, like I have I think I'm well known in the industry. People know my work. They know I work hard. I'm honest and everything. But sometimes they cannot help. So you have to get used to rejection. And it's not that they don't want to work with you. It's perhaps that at that stage they don't need your services. So it's really funny that people that said no to me at the beginning, a year later or 2 years later, came to me and said, "I'm ready for your service now. How can we start working together?"
Yes.
So that happened. The fourth thing is, I think when you start a business, you have a big idea, and that's what you want to focus. But you need to learn how to read the market to understand what's happening, and if you need to pivot and change and modify the idea, do it. Don't get stuck in your way and perhaps go bankrupt, or that the business doesn't grow enough because you cannot pivot. You need to be flexible, and you need how to learn how to listen to your market and customers. We had to do that, and we've had to do it a few times. And the last thing is the take action. A lot of people don't start their working on their idea, or don't launch the business because they don't have the perfect equipment, or they don't have the perfect website, or they are waiting for something. That I think that's an excuse, and the reality is that you're afraid of the rejection or failure. Just go, do it, take action, and see what happens. You can fix things on the way. I love a book that the title is Ready, Fire, Aim, which means do the main things, launch the thing, and then start focusing on the little things and aiming the solutions for those little things. And the last thing, I think it's even though it sounds ugly, you need to focus on sales. At the beginning, you kind of, like I am part of communications, and my expertise is in design, and that's what I wanted to focus at the start. But I realized quickly that if I don't become sustainable, if I don't have revenue, if I don't have profits, any big idea, any good or positive intention doesn't work if you don't have revenue to make your business sustainable.
Look, that's just a masterclass there. So I really, if you're listening right now, just go back and re-listen to that. Go back, 15, 30 seconds. But that's just absolute gold. And, if I summarize again, it's, the isolation, it's the financial constraints, it's the rejection, it's, the ability to pivot on your ideas, it's taking action, and sales. I think that's, a brilliant way of summarizing what it takes to make this really difficult journey from employee to entrepreneur. So the next section.
And Paul, look, I just
Ricardo.
want to mention that it's very hard sometimes to identify these things are happening to you. Like it took me perhaps a year and a half to find the solutions, or to identify some of these things. So it's tough. It's not easy.
No, and that's why the best sports people in the world still have coaches. I'm 100% agree that it's always obvious when someone else points it out, but it's not obvious to you at the time. So that's a great build. So now going to the build section, what do you say to people when they say, "Hey, Ricardo, what do you do today?"
So I have a couple of things in terms of Bedssi, which is the accommodation business. We basically provide customized accommodation solutions in Australia. We connect the guests with the most suitable accommodation solution there is, and we do it regardless of the type of guest. It could be a student, it could be a group and delegation, it could be a VIP or a government delegation, or even corporate. We do that, and we filter the information and their specific needs to the most appropriate and suitable provider. And we also think of things like budget, destination city, length of stay, because based on that, we can also work on the provider and look at the best option. And in terms of the podcast, I basically interview successful people, or people that have made mistakes in their journey, and they were able to get to the other side, so that they can provide advice and like tactical information to the young generation, the students, and people who are trying to get to the next level.
Great. And what do you know about podcasting that many people don't?
I think podcasting, it's great. For me, it started as a side business, and it's now one of my biggest passions because I'm learning so much. But in terms of the practical things for podcast, I think you need to make it as easy as possible. Like you want to make this trendy product and all these fancy sounds and things and everything, every little detail that you want to put into the podcast, it means work for you. And if it becomes a lot of work, then it stops being fun. It becomes a job, and then you stop doing it. So my advice is, and this is what I put a big emphasis on when I started, is how can I streamline the whole process? How can I make it easy for me that I can replicate? And then it just went from there.
Yeah, no, great advice. And what about your first customers for Bedssi? Sorry, how did you acquire them?
Well, so Bedssi is basically like a marketplace. So I connect the students or the guests to the most appropriate accommodation provider. So we had to contact and had a balance of both. And that's the hard thing about the marketplace. So what we started doing is contacting the host. And it was just going one after the other and just being relentless with moving forward until somebody said, okay, yes, we want to work with you, start giving us the clients. And with that in mind, then we started to get the students. You know, we could tell the students, we have accommodation providers. We now have a solution for you, even if it was one. And something that really helped me was, as I said, my wife was kind of guiding me and giving me advice on the side. And because I had the experience of working in education for so long and I had a lot of contacts, I went to all the people that were close to me and I said, look, help me perhaps spread the word. And they did slowly, so that helped as well. But the reality is that as a business person, you cannot rely on them because they're busy or they have their goals or their own problems. So it's very hard for people to really start helping you. And I know people say, but I have a friend that is going to really help me. Even if that's the case, don't rely on them. So that was the way I just got the first customer. It was finding that little balance at the beginning. And from that, I could start saying, look, I'm working with this provider already. Do you want to work with us? I already helped this provider get this client. Do you want to work with us? So it kind of grows slowly and organically.
And who is your ideal client at the moment? So I know that you sort of mentioned uni students, etc. But who's sort of your ideal client? If you had to market to one, who would it be?
Look, I have three. In reality, I have three because I help not only individuals, but I help groups as well. So my main client and one of the main ones is the individual students that regardless of the country where they come from, they want to study English or an undergrad or postgraduate degree in Australia. So they're one of our main clients. Another one are the organizations that bring groups and delegations to Australia. So they're a very big client of ours. And the other one are the agencies that deal with students all over the world. So those are my three main clients right now.
Great. And in 3 years' time, what will Bedssi look like in 3 years' time?
So I think, or at least my aim, is to become the accommodation solution that people talk about, that people are recommending through word of mouth, that I don't have to invest so much time and so much effort in promoting and getting known and getting a name and putting my brand out there, but people already know that I provide a great service, that they're happy how their friends or somebody they knew were treated and they felt working with us or using our services. So that's, I think, our main aim, to grow sustainably through pure word of mouth. And I suppose expanding into other countries. I would like to perhaps work in New Zealand or perhaps in the US, but that's another completely new world and huge market.
Yeah, and how do you get new business these days? What are the things that are working best for you to, certainly on the on the demand side?
I think it's not a matter of growing, but then getting people complaining and customers having a bad experience. It's about sustainable growth, I think. So apart from what I said just now, it's basically we understood after a long time that it's about education. Like at the beginning, two things: education and asking questions. So education is managing expectations. International students, they dream about coming to Australia. They don't really understand how it works. And then when you start providing information, they basically are surprised by how expensive Australian cities are.
Mm-hmm.
And that has been a real challenge, because we kind of at the beginning started to get into a vicious circle. They would inquire from overseas. We would tell them the price. They would think it would be too expensive, even though we didn't own any rooms. We were just telling them the reality of the market here. They would say, no, you're too expensive. They would arrive. They would realize we would have a perfectly okay room option for them. But then they came back to us saying, okay, you were telling the truth, please help me. And then by that time, it was too late, because the cheap options were gone. So we started to get into this vicious circle, and the way we solved the problem was through education. We started to tell them, okay, please look at these other room options that we don't even know, but please compare. Please read this information so that you can identify legal providers. Read this other information so that you can learn how to protect yourself and identify against housing scams. So all this information and education we were giving them started to profile us as a business that was trying to protect their well-being, help them with their experience, and provide a good service. So that was a long journey, because it was doing research on how can we create all this information, and it's been a long process, but I think worth it, because now the students that use our service have a good experience. And the other one that I mentioned was listening to your client at the beginning, and this comes, I suppose, back into the sales issue or point I was mentioning before. When you're trying to make new business or create new or have new clients, your kind of gut reaction or initial reaction is to tell them what you do, tell them your fantastic service and all that stuff. And now I do the complete opposite. I kind of became like a doctor. When you go to the doctor, the first 10 minutes is asking you questions. What's happening? What did you do? Where's the pain? How can I help you? And then they have a solution. So that's the way I work now. It's what are you doing? What's not working? And how can I fill that gap?
And some of the biggest challenges that you face running Bedssi at the moment?
Challenges, I suppose, it's have a proper profitability. We've been in business three years. The first year was extremely tough. You seriously are surviving, are putting your brand out there, and financially it's very, very challenging. And I can kind of understand why so many businesses close in the first year. Mm-hmm. The second year we became sustainable, so we were able to pay for everything. And in this third year, it's just about how can we become profitable. So I suppose the challenge to do that is not obviously grow our client base, but it's about improving the profit percentage from the revenue. And the way I'm doing it, or I'm focusing it right now, is in improving the processes and procedures. So if I have very strict procedures and processes that I can delegate, and it's very easy to train somebody to do the job, then I'm happy with that. So that's my challenge right now: profit and processes.
Right. And how big is your team?
It's not big at all, and I think it's exactly because of the processes I've created. Like it's very easy to replicate and very easy to do a job. So the team I have is basically the accountants, the programmers, the bookkeepers, and people doing student counseling. So that's it. It's less than 10 people, and they're everywhere. So that's, I suppose, the beauty of having an online business, that you can delegate easily. But I suppose you need to also learn how to hire the right people.
Yes. And if you had to give one tip on hiring the right people, what would that be?
Look, I think, or at least this is what I've done, and listening to other podcasts and advice from people and reading a lot, I think is one, being very specific with the job. So don't try to mix two jobs in one and things like that. It's just one proper job. In putting little tricks in the process, just to know that people are paying attention and they have attention to detail, which is important with every task. So, for example, if I'm putting the job description and it has 10 points, in point number 6 I say, please include a picture of your computer. So immediately, if I receive 50 applications and only 5 have the picture of the computer, the other ones I already filter out. So little things like that. And obviously, in the interview, I pay a lot of attention, to the type of energy they have, if they're proactive and things like that. That's very important for me.
Brilliant. Well, just before we move into the next section, I'd like to mention our YouTube channel called Build, Live, Give, You Get. Great tips to help corporate escapees, just like Ricardo, to rapidly grow. So please go have a look at the content. If you love it, subscribe and share to help other corporate escapees. And also stay to the end of this podcast, as I'll give my summary of Ricardo's interview. So Ricardo, the next section is the live section. So what are some of the daily habits that help you be successful?
Look, I think this sounds counterintuitive, but I think having time for myself, it's very important. I think that's how I get my the solutions to the problems and new ideas and things like that. And I personally love to swim in the ocean. I'm privileged enough to live a block away from the ocean, so I go swimming once or twice a day, and that's really a perfect time for me to either start the day or finish the day. And that disconnects me from the day-to-day tasks, and as I said, my mind starts to work in a different way. So that's great for me. Another thing is I really put an emphasis on sleep. So I don't really work ridiculous amounts of times, like 12 hours a day. I personally believe that after 6 or 7 or maximum 8 hours of work a day, you start becoming less unproductive. So you just do half of the jobs, or you do them badly. So I put a lot of emphasis on me, and the other thing is I dedicate as much as possible listening to podcasts. Like when I'm driving, when I'm in traffic, I don't see it as a negative because I'm learning. That's when I'm on my own. I'm not talking. I'm just listening to other people give you tips and give you advice. And the podcasts are, for me, the best things. That all the business ideas, all the solutions to problems, things when I'm stuck, come from podcasts most of the time.
Excellent. And I know you and Susan have just had Raphael, who's 6 months old. Yeah, which is congratulations, fantastic. What have you been able to do with Raphael that you may not have been able to do if you were still back in the university days?
Oh, look, we were talking with my wife the other day about this specific thing, because you're always thinking about the financial part. Like if I stayed in my job, I would have earned all this other money, and it's a sacrifice financially sometimes. But on the other side, I have time for myself, I have time for my family. I have time to do all these other side projects like the podcast. Like I couldn't do that if I was employed. So there's so much benefit of being your business owner, being a business owner, that I would say perhaps the only true negative part is at the beginning, that financial instability. The rest is positive, and I'm loving being able to spend time with my wife and my son.
Excellent. Well, the next section's the give section. So what's a charity or a community that you're passionate about, and why?
So right now we're supporting kids in Colombia with education. So I think education is vital, and I suppose that's why I've been involved in the industry for close to 20 years. But we're trying to help kids go through high school and then hopefully have a better future. And I really hope I can grow this part as well. Like if my business starts or continues to grow, then I hope to grow this part as well.
Excellent. Well, look, the last section's the action section. So I'll ask you some questions to get some rapid fire responses. So the first one is, what are your top 3 productivity tips?
One is starting my day with the most difficult or boring task. Like at the beginning, I used to shuffle it for days and days and days until it was urgent. Now I try to do it first thing in the morning, and then my day becomes much brighter. So that's one. The second one is, you need to learn how to say no. Like at the beginning of your business, you try to get as much business as possible, but not all business is good business. So you need to learn how to filter things that perhaps are going to take too much time, and then you kind of relegate the opportunities that are really good. So learning how to say no, it's very important. So that's something that really brought my productivity up. And the third thing is something I learned from another podcast as well, is you need to learn how to prioritize your tasks. There's the theory that there's 3 types of tasks. One that is worth $20, one that is worth $100, one that is worth $1,000. You should delegate the tasks that are worth $20 and $100 and only focus on the ones that are 1,000, which is basically meeting new clients, prospecting, negotiating deals, innovating, all of that you need to focus on, and the rest learn how to delegate.
And I know you talked about processes and procedures, but what are some of the key systems you use to run your business?
Most of my business is based on the Google suite. So we use Google Drive, Google Documents. Even though it's a business email, it's through Gmail. So we love it, and we use all of that. So everything is in one centralized place, and we can share big documents. We can edit them as a team. We can communicate through them. Everything. So it's just great. That's our main thing.
Excellent. And I know that you mentioned you love podcasts, so this one might be a little bit harder for you, but what are some of your podcasts or favorite podcasts that you'd love to recommend?
Yep. So I really like a podcast called Mixergy. They're huge. In fact, he's one of the most known podcasts, and I'll tell you why. And the thing is that he interviews entrepreneurs or business owners, and then seriously drills them in specific topics. So, for example, if it's marketing, how did you do this? How did you solve it? Give me specific examples. Give me practical advice. And then it's 1 hour of just solving that problem. So it's just fantastic. I've got if I was stuck, listen to that, look for specific episodes, and then you can really get great ideas.
Yeah, and just quickly on that, sorry, Ricardo, just a quick shout out to Andrew Warner. I listen to his podcast as well. It's great, and I've been in regular contact with Andrew, so a quick shout out to him. And he does a great job for the overall global entrepreneur community. Sorry, so your next one?
The other one is kind of the complete opposite, and it's called How I Built This. It's an NPR podcast where they interview extremely famous people. So they interview the who started Uber and all these huge companies, and then they talk for half an hour on their story. So it's kind of very inspirational. Like if you're feeling low or down, you go listen to these stories, and everybody started small. Everybody had problems. Everybody had issues, and then they were able to successfully create a huge company. So that's it. Mixergy is very specific, very detailed. How I built this is very inspirational, and the big idea and the story. So it's actually quite nice.
Excellent. Well, the last question is, what impact do you want to leave on the world?
Well, look, I think with going back to my business, and I remember being an international student thinking, okay, where can I go to study? I looked at Europe, I looked at the States, I looked at Australia. Then I focused on Australia, and it became my complete dream. Like my life was going to Australia to study. And then there's so many things that you need to, and accommodation is one of the most important things. Once you find the city and the course you want to study, the most important question is, where am I going to live? So if I'm able to really help as many people as possible to have a good experience in Australia, arriving to Australia, for them to arrive to a decent place and fulfill that dream of coming to basically become better people through education, then that's my whole aim. And through the podcast, I'm trying to do, like I started as an architect. I got at some stage disillusioned with the whole thing, and then I had to change careers the hard way. I just want through the podcast to bring all this practical advice of people who perhaps did that, or bring their expectations to somewhat a realistic level. Then I'm happy with that. So it's all about helping as many people as possible, and yeah, I'm just slowly working towards that goal.
Okay, brilliant. Well, look, you can definitely find more about Ricardo at his podcast at innovatordiaries.com, and also his LinkedIn profile will have all of the great links that he's mentioned here in the show notes as well. So thanks a lot for coming on board today, Ricardo. I love, your journey, your story, what you're doing, and also how you're helping these great students that are coming here, not just to improve their lives, but also make all of our lives here in Australia better off. So well done, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity. I hope I really gave good information and at least something that can help somebody. If I help one person, I'm happy.
Brilliant. Okay. Thanks a lot, Ricardo.
No problem at all. Have a good day.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
That was a brilliant interview with Ricardo. Here are my key takeouts. So first is join a group. Don't be in isolation. Join a mastermind or something like that. Support from your family for financial pressure is really important. Get aligned on that. Be comfortable with rejection. Willing to pivot your idea. Don't hold on to your idea and think it's the only thing. Make sure that you're taking action, and finally sell. I think they were brilliant takeouts from this great interview with Ricardo. I'd love to hear what you've got. So please share with me at paul@buildlivegive.com. Also, if you know other corporate escapees that would get great benefit from listening to Ricardo's story, please share it with them. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Corporate Escapees podcast, brought to you by Build, Live, Give. If you would like to join a community of like-minded peers, please visit www.buildlivegive.com. Until next time, thanks for listening, and be brave.